Nonlinear stories have always been a significant part of the entertainment industry. Movies like Citizen Kane, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and Pulp Fiction are just a few examples of many stories that employ a nonlinear narrative. The beauty of nonlinear narratives is how active it makes the audience. They have to be very careful, as the author may be deceiving them, which is often the case. But nonlinear narratives usually break the most simple rule in writing: show, don't tell. This rule is applied to give the audience a better experience in understanding things instead of telling them how they should feel. Today we'll talk about why nonlinear stories have to break the show don't tell rule and how you can use this to your advantage. Different kinds of nonlinear plots. Since the initial creation of nonlinear plots, several styles have formed into different storytelling devices. We have flashbacks and flash forwards, though I can't actually call every plot with flashbacks or flash forwards nonlinear. Some stories or movies might just use them as a plot device for exposition. We have parallel stories, which form the basis of many popular TV shows like Once Upon a Time, with the style of going back and forth between the present time in Storybrooke and the past in the Enchanted Forest. The parallel style might be the most popular one. However, if you watch shows like Arrow or Pretty Little Liars, you know that's a risky choice, especially if the story isn't well outlined. When the past timeline catches up to the present timeline, the creators either have to come up with strange flashbacks or abandon the nonlinear style completely, or in worst cases, create sudden plot twists. We also have reversed chronology, which can be oddly satisfying to watch. Movies like Memento do this in a decent way. Throughout the years of cinema, many filmmakers have tried the nonlinear narrative at least once, but I'm here to talk about movies and TV shows in which the director purposefully told and didn't show, and the result of their decision. My main focus will be on the fragmented narrative because I think if done right, it can create absolute masterpieces. While breaking the show don't tell rule, I will discuss two shows that I believe did this in the best possible way. The fragmented plots are just like a detective story, in which the audience are the detectives themselves. They don't get the info of the events in the order they happen. They have to figure out the order themselves. Dark is one of my favorite shows of all time. It's such a gripping tale, and if you haven't watched it, I'm about to spoil it completely because I need to give you some context before discussing its writing style and plot. The story of Dark focuses on a small German town called Winden in the year 2019. The focus starts with one of our main characters, Jonas. After losing his father to suicide, he's left with endless questions. At the same time, strange things are happening in their town. For example, kids go missing. The start of Jonas's story is when he's out with his friends and something really spooky happens near the Winden caves, causing them all to run. In those moments, Jonas is holding hands with the little brother of his crush Martha and one of his best friends Magnus, when suddenly he loses him. The next day, they find a dead body of some kid, but nobody knows who it is, and it's not the missing kid. It turns out the same missing situation has happened before, and Mikhail's disappearance is the start of chain of events. The story of Dark starts smoothly considering the crazy run it's about to have. It tries to show all the characters in the first two episodes, their struggles, lives, lies, and after that, we're ready to see what happened to Mikhail. It turns out Mikhail has traveled back in time. The reason isn't clear yet, but he's gone 33 years back to 1986. Not long after this, we're hit with the first of many plot twists. This kid is actually Jonas's father. The time travel just shaped an entire loop. But the first season doesn't become fast-paced. It stays that way for almost the entire season, spending time with the past versions of the character before introducing the third time mark, which is 1953. Another thing that Dark does really well is establishing antagonists that we're curious about for 5 episodes or so before we're hit with the truth about them. But the truth only makes us more curious. It essentially tells you over and over again who you should watch or who is responsible before revealing plot twists. In the first season and early episodes, we have a mysterious character named Noah who is believed to be responsible for the kids going missing. But just before Noah's part in the story is revealed, they introduce another character who's probably responsible for the time loops. That's where Adam comes into the picture. Then we have Adam for season 2 before being hit with another antagonist, which is Eva. The story repeatedly tells you who you should think is responsible for this chaos of time loops, for kids being their own mother's mother or being their own great-great-grandfather. In those tellings, the story is showing evidence to convince you. It is only at the end when you realize that all this time you've been shown a narrative and told another one. Only after getting the final answers will you realize you have to go and rewatch the entire thing to find out the real narrative, this time through the actual perspective. All those so-called antagonists were just a part of such a big puzzle, each having their own part in the story. Yes, Noah was actually responsible for the missing kids, and Adam was responsible for the time loops because of how Claudia and Eva were sabotaging his plans to keep the loops alive, but they were never the reason of its being in the first place. So what happens in the show is it creates something that Hitchcock would call a MacGuffin, but it's not an object we're after, it's actually a point in time we're trying to fix, or a person believed to be responsible for all the loops, only to realize that this person wasn't the answer we were looking for. Initially, Adam, Eva, or Noah might be the answer for a short period of time, but they were never the problem or the reasons behind it. All the reason why the timelines, despite being crazy, are flawless is that it's all planned out before the actual writing process begins. So revealing plot twists don't come off as a cheap plot device or an execute to keep the show interesting, but rather a clever way to misguide us. But the genius of Dark doesn't depend on misleading the audience with info that have no actual effect. It's the what ifs that characters and the theme of the story explore, which have great consequences throughout the story. I will discuss the themes of Dark in another video, but to give you one example of many great themes the show presents to us is a question of free will, something everyone in Dark is struggling with. This allows the writer to become the master of this haunting narrative. That's telling rather than showing. But to put it better, the scenes might show the truth, but the order of those scenes are definitely trying to tell another tale. So here are some things we can learn from Dark. Plan out all the important events in their actual order. Create 2 or 3 major shifts in the story. These shifts can happen at any time in the chronological order, but since you're telling the story out of order, you can place those at important plot points and show fragments of each event but keep the real answers hidden to create suspense. This is a very popular technique in the next show I want to talk about as well, The Haunting of Hill House. This is another favorite show of mine, and if you haven't watched it, you're missing out on a great story. The Haunting of Hill House is about a family called the Cranes who move into an old house hoping that after fixing it, they can sell it for a large amount of money. In the present timeline, things are different. The family seems to have fallen apart and each of them has their own life. What the show does incredibly well is the repetition of some events and the perspective it gives to each character. We see the last night in the Hill House almost through each individual character's eyes. We start with Steven, who doesn't know a lot. He just knows that on the last night, their father decided for some reason to leave their mother behind. Then the reality peels off little by little. In the third episode, if you play Theo's vision in slow speed, they actually show a lot of important scenes in high speed, including Hugh pushing Liv onto a wall to save the twins. What Hill House does is make the narrative into an almost memory of each character, exactly how we remember them, chopped off and non-linearly. But just like Dark, Hill House, while showing some major foreshadowings or even in some cases hiding the answers in the plain sight, its answers throughout the 10-episode run. The first big question would be the bent-necked lady and the reason behind Nilla's visit to Hill House, and more importantly her suicide, which becomes clear later that it wasn't a suicide at all. The bigger question, at least for me, would be what Olivia was seeing during her experience, because as we saw, each character had their own sense of reality that the house created for them, and Olivia probably had the strongest one of all. But the show tells you over and over again that Liv had mental illnesses, and it actually reveals fragments in which she might look as bad as it can get. Holding a screwdriver in front of Hugh's neck is definitely suggesting that idea, or smashing a mirror with her hand, which Stephen actually put a lot of effort into. Those are all suggesting her sickness. It's only by watching Olivia's episode that we'll get the context of these events. We also have Nellie's wandering dance in the first episode. The first thing the story is showing you about Nellie's present story is the evidence to make us believe she might actually have mental problems. But was this scene the entire context, or was something bigger behind it? Whether you're telling a crime story or a horror one, nonlinear plots can be a good plot device to hide the truth and keep the audience on the edge of their seats. What I love about them is how close they are to the human mind. If someone is telling you the story of anything, they would go at it memory by memory, which means they're bound to leave some pieces of info out, especially if they either weren't aware of it or they want to purposefully hide something to make themselves look better. Or sometimes they keep a specific piece of information for the end, perhaps to keep their audience listening until the very end. Mike Flanagan's Fall of House Usher does this as well. He repeatedly shows the night the Usher twins make their deal with Verna, but he withholds something really important until the very end, the specific details of that deal. For the sake of keeping this video as short as possible, I'll try to stop here, but if you want more details on how to write nonlinear plots, make sure to comment them below, and see you next time.